Hello, everyone, and welcome to this professional development training. My name is Stephanie. I am your founder and host here at the Intentional IEP, and I'm so excited to be here with Jenny today because we're going to be talking about her book that's coming out, but also just her journey as a parent who has an autistic daughter. And so we're going to be talking about watching Sarah rise, which is a journey of thriving with autism. So before we dive into all the things and we learn your story and your daughter's story and about your book, can you please share just a little bit about yourself and your journey within the special education community?
Yeah. Um, let's see. It was at about 6 months of age when I realized, no, it was even at 6 weeks of age that something was a little different about my daughter, Sarah. And then by the time she was 6 months, it was like something's really different. And then at a year, that's when we got a diagnosis. And that was helpful just to know, oh, it wasn't something that I did to
Right.
mess anything up. It was just a genetic fluke that then happens to present with many of the kids as having autism. It also presents with epilepsy and just global delays overall. So we were into the early intervention right away. And then when my daughter turned 3, she immediately started preschool to continue getting early intervention. So I'd say it was at that point that we entered the IEP realm. Before that it was certainly meetings and people filling out
Yeah.
lots of papers, but it was different from IEPs. I will say I hear lots of parents complaining about IEPs and feeling like they have to go in with their dukes up and they're fighting for things and they're not getting it. That has never been my experience. I have always had a positive experience with IEP meetings, feeling like, wow, there is this incredible team of people and they are all thinking well about my daughter and giving her the support that they can. That said, I also did choose to pull her out of school once I started the Sunrise program with her because it was immediately obvious that it was way more impactful than any therapy that she was getting elsewhere. And part of that was just the amount of time I could put in, but it was also that I was interacting with her differently. And so then we had a phase where she was not in school, and then we re-entered and got back into the IEP world. And that has also been interesting because I was the full team lead for the Sarah Rise program. And now I'm not the lead when we're in IEP meetings. And I have to remind myself, oh, what would I be wanting for her? What are the goals I think are important? Or how do I think I want people to treat her? So the main thing I remind people every time we have a meeting is to give her more time than expected to answer a question. Like count in your head to 20 after prompting her for asking a question or asking her to do something, because often at home, it's just when I'm about to give up, when I'm getting to 18, 19 and thinking she is totally not going to do this. She didn't hear me, whatever it is. Then she answers or then she does it. I'm like, oh, she just needs more time. And so that's the main thing that I remind people, but they're very open to that reminder.
I love that. And I love that you have that specific, like, wait 20 seconds, because usually as teachers, we wait 3 or 5 or 10, and then we reprompt. So I love that you're like, nope, wait 20, because wait 20, and I promise it'll be there. So, like, that is so important when you can share that with the team because it just makes things so much smoother, especially for your daughter in school. And she's not getting frustrated when we're like, okay, well, answer this question. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, what's your answer? She has more wait time. So I love that. Well, we're gonna dive into just everything about your story. So, like you've said, your daughter has autism, and your book that's coming out in January 2025, we're going to link the pre-order here. If you're watching it after 2025, the link to shop for her book is below as well. But you talk about how her early years were filled with challenges. Can you share that part of your journey with us?
Yes. Firstly, it was just really hard to see the other babies in my mom groups reaching for toys, rolling over, and, reading the books of, oh, this is what your baby will be doing. And my baby was not doing that and feeling like I was somehow doing something wrong or missing something, or was she not getting the right kind of food or whatever it was. I struggled with a little hiccup in my milk production So then we had to supplement with formula. And this was all at the time she was, in theory, supposed to start eating solid foods, if you go by what the books say. She was not showing any indication of what the books say of like, oh, your kid will be reaching or interested. No, no, she was not. But we tried anyway. And then that catapulted us into a couple years of struggling with her being diagnosed as failure to thrive. And that means not gaining the weight that they want to see. And checking with doctors often, having a nutritionist come to the house to weigh her every 2 weeks. I was desperately trying to do anything I could to get her to gain weight, feeding her oil in syringes, butter pats. I would just buy a box of butter pats the way they would serve them in restaurants, and I would unwrap them in front of her like they were little candy things. I would give her Andes mints, ice cream. I would add powdered oil to her foods. We had super duper fortified drinks that we called super milk and super juice, even though that wasn't their actual name. I would take her for walks in the stroller, and after every couple steps, I would stop and give her a bite or a sip. Or we'd drive around and I would pull over and give her a bite or a sip because somehow she seemed to eat better when I did that. But I think that was probably one of the most highly stressful parts of the early years, was getting her to eat enough. And the concern was, oh, if she doesn't gain enough by this amount of time, then we'll need a feeding tube. And I just really, really, really didn't want to do a feeding tube.
Yeah.
I think I was also in denial and or fighting with denial about her having a diagnosis at all and having special needs. And so for me, the feeding tube meant accepting all that. Whereas I know many parents choose a feeding tube and it's great and it's helpful. And I wonder if I had done that, would I have just had more peace in my heart instead of the stress? Um, but by the time she was 4, she actually was eating enough and seeming to like eating that panic started to go away. It still wasn't, she wasn't eating healthily. She was still eating ice cream for breakfast if she wanted. But the other stress points were just the delays in development globally of she wasn't reaching for toys when other babies reach for toys. When I would try tummy time, she would turn beet red and be screaming and pressing her head down into the carpet instead of raising her head up to strengthen her neck muscles. She wasn't rolling over, she wasn't sitting. All those things came later. She was 1 when she could sit by herself, and she started crawling at 18 months and walking at age 3. So all of those, it was just having lots of specialists in the house or me taking her to see specialists and feeling like I was supposed to do all this magical work with her. But a lot of my days just felt very lonely and long, and trying to keep her happy and trying to get enough food in her, and then trying to make her practice the things that they wanted her to practice, but then she would be upset and crying. So that was hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then she wasn't talking. She could make the sounds for each letter of the alphabet. And we had a food board that her speech therapist had helped us make so that she could point to what she wanted to eat. And she had some signs, which she still will break out. I think they're so ingrained in her nervous system that if she feels passionately about something, she will go like more, and you'll hear the knuckles, even though she's saying it. But I think that was just, it's hardwired into her
Yeah.
nervous system. So it was around that point at age 4 where we were thinking, okay, she's still maybe not eating enough or not eating healthily. She's not talking. What if we were able to do something to get enough nutrition that maybe then her language would come more easily? And that is why I looked at the Sunrise program when I did.
Well, let's pause for a moment and talk about why giving students and just individuals in general a voice is so important. So, at what age did your daughter start talking? You said by around 4?
No, well, yes, yes. At 4, she started talking, but that wasn't until she was 4.5 when I came home from my Sunrise program training and
Okay.
started working with her differently. Before that, she had about 5 spoken words, and
Okay.
she could probably sign for 20 to 40 things, and she could point to things on a food board or point to some pictures of toys. We didn't have an electronic talker for her at that
Yeah.
point, but just the transformation from before the food board to after the food board was amazing and took away so much stress because it was just me guessing. And
Yeah.
then she would be upset at what I brought her. Whereas this way, she could say, oh, I want chocolate ice cream. I want Cheetos. I want Fritos. I want Andy's Mints. And that was really helpful to have her feel like she had some power. And so then her frustration level dropped significantly.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's so powerful. And you said one of the therapists that you were working with recommended the food board.
Yeah, I think actually the most helpful thing was that one day the speech therapist said, okay, your homework for the next meeting is to print out pictures of her favorite foods. And that was very simple. That was something I could do. And
Yeah.
then she came prepared with contact paper, like the clear
Oh, yeah.
both sides, and double-sided Velcro tape and a big poster board. And instead of working with Sarah during that time, we made these little food cards. And I think what was important with that is that she was making time to do it with me so that I wasn't feeling overwhelmed or what if I put it off and didn't do it. It was like, okay, we're doing this now. We're not waiting. And at the end of that session, we had a food board and she could communicate.
I I love that, and I love that you see the benefit in the SLP doing it with you. And so it wasn't just like, here's a board for you to use. And so teachers, what I want you to take away from this, and parents as well, if your teams or your specialists that you're working with in and out of schools, if they're not providing this modeling or they're not providing you with this, here's how to use this or here's how to set it up, ask for it. Teachers, if you're not providing that, it's so helpful because imagine being given a curriculum to teach your students how to read and they're like, here you go. Just follow the lessons and just here you go. It's the same thing as with anything else. We have to teach our students how to do something if we want them to be able to do it. We can't just expect them to do it. And that goes with anyone on the IEP team, other specialists, other special education teachers, parents, administrators. If they don't know how to implement something or do something, we have to share with them how to do it. What is the expectation? So I love that the SLP did that with you. And I love that you see the benefit of it in it because that's so powerful. I also have linked here, we have a training on AAC, which is not a food board, but it's similar. And I'm also going to link some blog posts that we have on core vocabulary, which do talk about, you did talk about the different electronic devices. So there's a ton of those when it comes to speech therapy and things that you can use. So if you want a starting place for those, they're all linked below for you here. So you keep talking about this treatment center, and I'm excited to learn more about this because I've never heard about it. So tell us more about the treatment center. What's it called? And share that whole part of your journey with us.
Yeah, I would love to. So it's called the Autism Treatment Center of America. It is up in Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts, and they do in-person and online trainings to teach parents how to run sunrise programs. That's SON for the sun part because it is named for the first boy whose parents designed the program for him to help him. His name was Ron Kaufman. His parents are Bears and Samaria Kaufman. And this was in the 70s, and Ron was diagnosed as very autistic. And some specialists thought he might be deaf because of his non-responsiveness. And at that time, the treatments were not what they are today. And so specialists suggested that the parents just put him in an institution. And they toured some and looked at what was happening and were like, no, thank you. We are not going to do this. And they really, really wanted him to know that he was loved. That was their most important goal. And they also had been doing a lot of exploring on their own, of looking at their own beliefs and how that impacted their reactions to things and their happiness. And so instead of judging him as bad or wrong or disabled in any way, they were just feeling like he was their perfect, wonderful child and they wanted to love him. So they set up one of their bathrooms to be like a quiet, non-distracting space and would take turns working with him and had some volunteers also in just this quiet one-on-one environment. And instead of stopping anything he was doing, if he was sitting and spinning a plate or watching the toilet flush or anything else that was repetitive, that even today, many therapies try to shut down the repetitive behavior to force a connection. They said, no, we're going to just join that behavior, which from the outside might look like copying, but joining is actually, it's doing it to truly understand it and enjoy it too. So you're not just going through the motions. You're really like, this is really awesome to spin a plate. Let me be the best plate spinner I can be. Or for Sarah, it was opening and closing lids. And you're just in there with your person, or they were in there with Ron, or I was in my room with Sarah at a distance where it makes eye contact easy, but it doesn't feel like you're crowding them. And you're just doing the same thing until they give a flicker of acknowledging you, like with eye contact or speech or whatever it is for whatever your kid might have. And that is your moment to appreciate them, like to celebrate the eye contact. Or with Sarah, I could then start saying a word. We did a lot of opening and closing lids of Play-Doh containers and then taking the Play-Doh out. And we happened to have one container with soft Play-Doh and one with hard. So I just worked with that with her. And then when she would try saying soft, then I would really celebrate her attempt, even if it was nothing like the actual word, but just to celebrate the attempt to not shut down any of her communication and any of her connection. So back to Ron and Bears and Samaria, they worked with Ron, they and their volunteers, for about 3 years intensively, like 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, one-on-one. And he would not be diagnosed as having autism today. Now, I know lots of people have a lot of strong feelings about, should you talk about a cure? Is a cure possible? I don't even want to weigh in on that. I just want to say, wow, he was not connecting socially. He was not responding to verbal outreach, and he was doing all these repetitive behaviors. And at the end of 3 years, he was not doing those things, and he was reachable and connecting and went to school and graduated from an Ivy League college and then became the global director of the Autism Treatment Center of America. And now he runs the Safe to Connect approach with Kate Wild, who's also a Sunrise specialist. And so that is a similar approach to helping parents with how can you think about meeting your kids where they are and attending to your own internal beliefs and landscape so that you are clean and clear to come to your kid, which is what the Option Institute, which is the companion to the Autism Treatment Center of America, that is their approach for all of it as well.
How did you find the treatment center?
Well, I had actually known about it since I was in college because the Option Institute part of it is to help anybody look at their own beliefs and how they're moving through life. So how are you interfacing with life so that you can maybe become happier and not feel like you are at the mercy of circumstance? Just to sort of take ownership and say, oh, this is happening. How am I thinking about it? And how am I thinking about myself in relation to whatever is happening? So I had read books by Barry Neil Kaufman. He is known as Bears affectionately by anyone who's taken a course with him, I think. So I had read Happiness is a Choice, which is lots of little short essays and chapters about people dealing with various different things in their lives and turning them around in ways you might not expect. I found it all very inspiring. And I read Sunrise, The Miracle Continues, which is about their journey with Ron. And I was so blown away and so impressed with their parenting. I was like, wow, I almost want to run a Sunrise program for someone. Now, I was like 20 at that time. So I didn't have any kids. I wasn't pregnant. I wasn't thinking of having kids anytime soon. And then I had Sarah, and I even knew the Sunrise program had been used to help kids with feeding issues and difficulties, and that it wasn't just for people with autism, it can be for anyone with any challenge. But I didn't jump right in. I think I was too overwhelmed as a new mom and somehow thinking I should be able to figure it out because I knew the basic ideas. And I had done an 8-week course over a summer when I was in college just to help me become happier. So I didn't reach out right away. But then when we reached that point where, okay, Sarah's 4, she's still not talking, maybe we could get her some help to get her to eat better. I knew they ran intensives where you could bring your kid up for a week and they would work with your child. They would work with you as a parent and any other team members that you wanted to bring along. So initially I talked to their family specialist thinking, oh, we'll just book an appointment. We'll take her up for a week. They'll do something intensive and she will magically start eating better and everything will fall into place and, she'll be fixed. It was my thought.
Yeah.
But I talked to the family counselor and he said that he really recommended that I do the training and start a program first by myself so that I knew that I could make a difference by myself. And I think he was right. And we never did do the intensive at all. But as soon as I got back from my I did 3 separate weeks of training. But even after the first week, I came home and I started interacting with Sarah differently. And her language started expanding immediately because of how I was being different with her.
I love that so much. Well, you've talked about volunteers that help and interact with Sarah, but also with Ron. It was Ron, right?
Mhm.
Yep. Okay. I'm terrible with names, which is, I need to work on this. But how do you find the volunteers? Is it through the Autism Treatment Center? Is it through the Sunrise program, or is it just like an all call? Like, how does that work?
I think it works differently for each family, and they really are very clear that each family can design the level of program that they want and make sense for their life. So some people do lifestyle, they just change how they interact with their kid a little bit, how they think about things, but they don't have a special room, they don't have volunteers. Then if you're going to do part-time or full-time, which means anywhere from 20 hours to 30 hours to 60 or 70 hours, I was more spanning between 15 and 30 hours for my program with Sarah. Then they do recommend a room, a focus room, or a playroom. I did find that so helpful because otherwise it's like, oh, look, dishes. Oh, mail. Oh, I'm just going to tidy this thing instead of focusing on you. It was really
Yeah.
like I needed that to shut the door and force my butt to be on the floor. But also then you can make it really a simplified room for your child because a lot of classrooms and homes have so much busy sounds and busy walls, and all of that can be really distracting, which makes it harder if you're just trying to teach a person to say one word and really wanting it simple or to look at you. Like you want to be the most interesting thing in the room, not something on the wall, not technology. That is way too hard to compete with that.
Yeah.
So the training teaches parents how to interact with their kids, how to set up a room, and ideas for how to find volunteers. Like maybe you take
Oh,
out an ad in a newspaper, maybe you make a flyer, maybe you send out emails and they have samples so you can look at what other parents have done. But they also really talk about um, the parents' beliefs about, do you really think you're going to find volunteers or do you not? And I know a lot of it also depends on maybe where you are. I'm very lucky to be in a city. I'm near a couple colleges. There are lots of high schools around. There are also websites that are designed to pair people who've gone through the Sunrise training and are looking for volunteers with people who have maybe heard of the Sunrise program and want to volunteer in a program. But when I started, I just sent out an email to friends and family, most local, but some farther away, thinking, well, I want people to know what we're doing, and maybe someone knows someone in Pittsburgh. And I said, here's what we're doing. We don't know if it'll change Sarah at all, but we love her and we want to play with her and help her thrive. And I'm looking for volunteers for 2 to 4 hours a week, and I will provide training. And then once a month, there is going to be a team meeting of all the volunteers. So I sent that out. I also had asked or offered the option if people wanted to bring food or hang out with my younger daughter, Amy, so that I could be with Sarah. Like anything would be helpful. So I did have some people who offered to bring food. I did have some people who came regularly to be with Amy. And then I had people who wanted to be with Sarah. Or I had my neighbor said, "Oh, I have this friend whose daughter has done some babysitting with people with autism. Maybe you'd want a babysitter." And I thought, or a volunteer. So I connected with her and she came over and became one of the first volunteers. Then one of the biggest sources of volunteers was sending out an email to some friends who taught at Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh. They were connected to the drama departments. And I thought, well, I want people who are comfortable being silly. So maybe an acting student. And I don't know how many emails went out, how many got forwarded. I only got one answer. But that one person was so enthusiastic. He told all of his friends. And I got like four other people, maybe five from that, one of whom became really regular for years. The first volunteer, Adrian, he needed a job for the summer and I needed someone. So instead of him being just a sole volunteer, he was a paid volunteer, spending multiple hours with Amy during the week, multiple hours with Sarah. So he'd come maybe for 4 and 5 hours a few times a week to spend time with each child. And then I would be with the other one
Yeah.
during that time. So that was incredibly helpful. Then another volunteer came because one of my friends read my weekly updates to a friend of hers. And that friend called me up one day and was like, "Hey, I want to be part of your program," and started volunteering with Amy. And then there's a place called the Friendship Circle here, which matches teens, neurotypical teens with kids with special needs to play weekly. And I reached out to them and they said they had a teen who hadn't been matched. And I said, well, would they be open to being trained to not just show up and play, but play in a specific way? And he was. And then he did a presentation for his high school class because he loved what he was
Oh,
doing with Sarah.
wow.
And then one of his friends reached out and was like, "Hey, can I be part of your program?" So it just kind of spread so organically through word of mouth and through my reaching out and saying, "Hey, I want some help. Who wants to help? Who wants to have a good time playing with my daughter?"
Yeah.
The end of my book is actually a lot of entries written by my volunteers of how important it was in their lives and how much they changed by volunteering.
I love that. I'm gonna have to pre-order your book because as you were talking about how all of these connections for volunteers just kind of perfectly fell into place, I'm thinking all of these lives that Sarah has touched and just like vice versa, like it just, like I said, perfectly fell into place with the right people through the right channels at the right time. And I love that you included them in your book. I just think that that's so powerful. Um, and so I can't wait to read their stories because I mean, I know my journey as a teacher within our community and how touched I am and things, experiences I've had with families and students. And so that's so awesome. I love it. Well, how's your daughter doing today?
She's great. She absolutely adores her bus driver. Like they are best buds. And so the start and end of her days are just great because she's hanging out with her best bud.
Oh, I love it.
And when she comes home today, then I take her for a piano lesson, and then she'll drive with me to take her sister to an art class. In between that, she'll have maybe a short nap, a snack, and watch a show. On Mondays and Fridays, she goes to a job through her school. She's in a program that gives extra help and attention to kids who need it, and she definitely still does. So she's made incredible strides beyond where we ever dreamed possible when, it was like, is she going to pick up her head? And now, yes, not only does she pick up her head, but she takes piano lessons and she takes swim lessons and she can swim the full length of the pool without needing someone with her. I mean, she's not completely horizontal yet, but we're working on that. She has been in her school musicals. because
Oh,
her school says if you want to be in a musical, you can be in the musical. And so she needs a helper. And that's either been one of her teachers or last year it was me. And this year she's taking an acting class at a different location that is all for kids who might need a little extra help. But and she just learned to ride a bike, like all by herself. Doesn't need a helper to hold on. She can get started, ride the bike next to her dad through the woods.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I love it. So she truly is thriving. Like she's just
Oh,
doing
yeah.
so well. Oh,
Yeah. And she talks a ton. Actually, the thing that we are working on is to teach her when to not talk because you do have to know to
yeah.
notice, oh, someone else is talking here. I need to be quiet. And if anything has been a struggle in school, it is that. It's the
Yeah.
talking when it's not time to talk.
Oh my goodness. Well, tell us more about your book. What led you to write it and all of that?
Yeah. Well, when I started the program for her, I started emailing my parents and my best friends that I've known since I was 4 every week, being like, hey, look, here's the new words that she said. She just
Oh,
said 10 new words this week, or she played this game for a little bit,
yeah.
and just telling them what we were doing, or that we got new volunteers. And then I started adding the volunteers to that recipient list and adding other friends when they would ask, oh, how's she doing? Or other family members. So that started growing. And then my volunteer slash professional, Gregory, he was Sarah's speech therapist that we started hiring when she was 3 because we really liked how he worked with her. And then he was open to the training. And he kept saying, you should turn these emails into a blog. It could help other parents.
Yeah.
So finally, I did that. And then people would respond to the blog and the email saying, when are you going to write a book? And I tried sometimes, and I would feel so overwhelmed of, I don't even know how to begin telling this. And then the pandemic happened, and I was home a lot more. I was like, I think I suddenly could see the path to writing the book. And
Yeah.
so that is really when it came together. And I wanted to share the story to share that it doesn't have to be, oh, you had a kid who was struggling and look, now they came so far there you wouldn't have a diagnosis. That is not our path at all, right? There are lots of Sunrise families where that is true and that is phenomenal and amazing. But we also made a huge difference and it was life-changing for our whole family. And she still needs help. So I wanted to share that and also just the highs and lows emotionally of a lot of the time it was really, really hard to parent her. And a lot of the time I'm still not the parent I wish I was for her. And yet we still got her the support that she needed to thrive so incredibly. So I wanted parents who are sad, feeling hopeless, crying in their kitchen, cursing in their kitchen, maybe as I used to be sometimes, to feel like, oh, look, maybe I could do this thing, even just half an hour a day, that could make a big difference. And I don't have to be the perfect parent. And I can lose my temper sometimes, and we can still regroup and still be loving. And I can still help my child communicate and interact and feel heard and seen and loved. And a lot of people don't know about the Sunrise program
I haven't
because
heard of it.
applied behavior analysis is the main thing that's paid for by insurance. It's referred to as ABA. That's the main thing in schools. And I'm sure that it matters who is doing it and how they mesh with the kids. But I know a lot of families turn to Sunrise after not great experiences with ABA and feeling like they were forcing things on their kid, and that it's more, oh, do this thing and you'll get a reward
Hmm.
in some cases. And for Sarah, if anything, that kind of model backfired. Like we tried the traditional potty training here where you'll get a thing you like after something on the toilet. And oh gosh, then she was just trying to get the reward instead of actually doing what needed to happen. So it took us months to undo that and to say, oh, we're just going to follow her interest
Yeah.
and make her time in the bathroom enjoyable by hanging out reading books. And if anything happens, that's great. And if
Yeah.
nothing happens, that's great. We just read books together. So I think in terms of the whole IEP and for schools, I think the main thing that was so effective for Sarah is that we followed what she was interested in and instead of trying to make her interested in anything that we had. of our own, right? It was like, oh, she
Yeah.
likes to open and close lids. We're going to do that. And when I taught her to read, we did the How to Teach Your Baby to Read program,
Mhm.
which involves learning sight words. So I made cards with words that she liked, just whatever she was into at the time. And
Yeah.
that worked like a charm.
I love it. That is one thing when teachers are always like, oh, we started this, but someone like my student isn't into it. What do I do? And I'm like, well, what do they like? How can you make, like, if they like Spider-Man right now, how can we make Spider-Man fit into this story? Like,
Yes.
how can we put Spider-Man on this worksheet? Or Spider-Man goes to the pumpkin patch. Like, let's write a story about Spider-Man going to the pumpkin patch. Um,
Yes,
that
exactly.
just, if kid, like, just, hey, like, I will tell, like, personally, like, I love dinosaurs. I would write a story about a dinosaur. Like, Jurassic Park was real. I will volunteer as tribute. I will go and check it out for everyone. But that's how our kids are. Like, they have loves just like we do. And so hone in on that. Do the interest inventories, find out what they love, and then use that to your advantage in the classroom. Um, Proof. Jenny is proof here that it worked with Sarah at home, not even in the classroom. So it does work. It does work. Well, I'm going to link, I do have your book linked below here for pre-order, but I also have your website linked in your Instagram and your Facebook. So if anybody wanted to go read through your blog and get updates now about how she's doing or read back, and parents, if you're listening or watching this, you can also go see Jenny's website. I've linked it here, watchingsarahrise.com. But my last question that I always ask guests who are here at the Intentional IEP is, what is your best piece of advice? So what is your best piece of advice, Jenny, for other parents who may find themselves within the special education community?
I think to find the support you need for you when you come out against the big feelings in you. Because if I am not clean and clear in myself and relaxed, Sarah picks up on that. And then it's just a big clash between the two of us. And the idea that we're in control of our emotions, I'd say yes. And sometimes I need a helper, and it's a much bigger excavation to look back and say, like recently, I realized that I had felt like an imposter all my life, and that someone was going to figure out that I wasn't actually smart or wasn't smart enough to be wherever I was. And once I unearthed that tremendously big root of a belief, all of a sudden, seemingly unrelated and yet had to be related, I had so much more space for Sarah to be her. I just wanted to be with her more. I was more relaxed about her timing, about her talking about whatever she likes to talk about over and over and over again. I would notice things around the house that I had done. Like I made an art desk for Amy because she really loves art. And I was like, oh, I'm such a good mom. I was like, what thought was that? Because normally I'm like, oh, I should have done blah, 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 blah. And then I'd be a
Mhm.
better mom. Like, oh, so the choice about how I was feeling and responding actually had to go back like 100 steps to unearth where was the choice point, and it was how I was viewing myself and my intelligence. And I had to spend an hour reviewing my life and being like, oh, huh, I think I actually am smart. But I really had to look at it.
Yeah.
So I think I'd say as a parent, or if anyone is interested in the sunrise approach or reading happiness as a choice, my pitfall for myself was then I would feel unhappy and then be like, I should be happy. And so then I was being mean to myself. I was feeling unhappy and judging myself for it instead of saying, oh, wow, what's going on here? And give myself space to feel the emotion and not try to stuff it down. And then say, oh, well, what is that about? What is that connected to? So to be really kind, for parents to be really kind to themselves and allow those emotions to be there. And then it works like magic to have space and love for your kids.
I think that's great advice for teachers too, because a lot of the time we think we truthfully, we are not taught, the majority of us are not taught how to write IEPs by the colleges we attend or the schools that we go to. It's either we have a mentor teacher who teaches us, or we're reading books and figuring out on our own and going to conferences, or joining the Intentional IEP to learn more about how to be an IEP writer. And so even myself, I've had to go through as a baby teacher thinking, well, I suck at this. Like I am terrible at this because I had never had the training. And so then I read the books and I did the trainings and I did all of the things. And there are still moments where I'm like, I'm not that good at what I do. Like, um, and that's just that inner voice that I just have to tackle. And I think I love that advice because I think it's so powerful, even as a human being, just knowing about ourselves and being more aware of ourselves and why we're thinking certain things about ourselves and judging ourselves for doing things or saying things. So that's such great advice. Well, thank you so much, Jenny, for being here and just sharing your journey with us about being a mom of Sarah and Sarah's journey. And I've said it before, I've linked her book below here. It comes out in January of 2025. So I've linked the pre-order link on Amazon. Her website's here, her Instagram, her Facebook. I've also linked some other trainings and blog posts here at the Intentional IEP and our sister site, Mrs. D's Corner. But Jenny, can you please share where we can find you elsewhere, or maybe your book's not just available on Amazon either, right? There's other places they can purchase it.
You can get it on Bookshop, which means it's coming from lots of small independent bookstores,
Okay.
or Barnes and Noble. I also think if you go on any given bookstore site and search for it, it might come up. I know someone told me to check the Harvard bookstore and it's on their site as a pre-order. I'm like, oh, wow. Or I'll
That's
be doing
awesome.
a signing in Philadelphia at the Main Point bookstore. And if you search for it on their website, there I am. I'll be doing a Pittsburgh signing at the Penguin Bookshop in Sewickley. If you search on their website, there it is. So it should be widely available. It's distributed by Simon & Schuster, not published by them, but distributed by them. So it
Okay.
should be everywhere.
Awesome. Well, check all of the links below if you want to pre-order or purchase Jenny's book, read more about watching Sarah rise. I've also linked the Autism Treatment Center of America and the Option Institute, the Sunrise program, so you can go learn more about them. I'm going to go dive into that because this is news to me. So I learned something new today. The Happiness is a Choice book. So I've also linked that below. So you have lots of links to get you from here to your next step if whichever direction that you want to take. And thank you again so much, Jenny, for being here and just sharing your knowledge and expertise and your journey. We will see y'all in the next training.
Thank you.